Okay, so starting off today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about which is probably the biggest news throughout the National Football League right now, and that is the New York Jets safety Jamaal Adams coming out yesterday and requesting a trade. And I got to be honest with you. You guys know that I'm a big New York Jet fan, and I have a lot of strong opinions on this from both sides. And I'm going to tell you guys what I think about this whole New York Jet Jamaal Adams contract situation. I'll start off by saying this. The New York Jets drafted Jamaal Adams with the number 6 overall pick in the 2017 NFL draft, and they took him over a lot of prominent quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Pat Mahomes, who are in the National Football League right now and are at the top of quarterback rankings in the National Football League right now. But what I will also say is this. With that being said, Jamaal Adams has been a very good player on the field since he's gotten to the New York Jets. I think there's an argument to be made that he is one of the 2 or 3 best safeties throughout the National Football League, and he is by far and away the New York Jets' best player on the defensive side of the ball right now. But what I also will say is this. Jamaal Adams has to look himself in the mirror and say, all right, what exactly is going on here? And he has to look at the situation a little closely. Number one, starting at the trade deadline last year when Joe Douglas apparently was in talks about possibly trading him to the Dallas Cowboys, right? And Jamaal Adams threw a panic attack. He started going off. He was saying, how dare the New York Jets trade their best franchise player? You never see the New England Patriots ever consider trading Tom Brady. You don't really ever see the Saints considering trading Drew Brees, stuff like that. And I remember after I saw that, I was like, who the hell is this guy going out here and comparing himself to Tom Brady? And after a while, I kind of just forgot about it. His play made up for it throughout the season. I was like, all right, like, whatever. Hopefully, and this is before the pandemic, keep in mind. I was just like, hopefully, just keep the guy happy, and eventually I want him to be here long term. And keep in mind, I still do. I think the New York Jets ideally are in a better spot with Jamaal Adams on their team for the future than with him not being on their team. But here's the thing, though. When you look at Jamaal Adams and how he's been acting throughout this whole process, and it really did start once again during that trade deadline with Joe Douglas and the rumors of him going to the Dallas Cowboys and him feeling betrayed. I got to be honest with you, this dude's got to cut it out. And the more and more I look at the situation closely, I think the conclusion I may come to is that Jamaal Adams just doesn't want to be a New York Jet. This guy could go on the field and say how he's President Mall and say how he wants to be a Jet for life and how passionate he is for the team. But when you look at all these different facts, I don't see how this guy could be wanting to be a New York Jet for the near future just based on the way he's been acting. And I'll explain to you guys what I mean. First of all, he has to realize that he is a safety. He's not a quarterback. He's not a defensive end. He's not an offensive lineman. And those are usually the positions that throughout the National Football League you pay the big-time money to. And it's not Jamaal Adams' fault he's a safety. Once again, I would think he's one of the 2 or 3 best safeties in the whole National Football League. But that's number one. Successful teams aren't out here paying their safety big-time money. Especially, and here's the key part, 2 to 3 years before their contract expires. And I think that's the other thing that as a Jet fan, I don't want to say I'm not worried about it, but as a Jet fan, I'm always thinking at the back of my mind that Jamaal Adams has no right to be doing this. He still has 2 years left on his contract until he becomes a free agent. So if he wants to hold out and pull a Le'Veon Bell and let his value go down, I'm not saying that would be fine with me, but all he's hurting is himself. And going back to why I believe he's actually doing all this is I think he wants out of New York. And look at the way he's been acting. First of all, this dude has to realize we're in the middle of a pandemic. People around the country have lost their jobs. People have been struggling financially. That's number one. He has to realize that come next offseason or whenever he becomes a free agent, we have no idea what the NFL salary cap is going to look like. We have no idea. That's number one. And number two, when you look at the guys in Jamaal Adams' draft class, and Christian McCaffrey is the one exception, has Patrick Mahomes, have you heard him, moaning about getting a new contract? Have you heard Deshaun Watson, who was another quarterback in that same draft class, moaning about a new contract? Well, the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. Because those guys understand the current circumstances we're in right now. They understand that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and they also understand that eventually their team is going to pay them. As a matter of fact, when you look at, the way general managers and contracts have been working throughout the last couple of years in the National Football League, the Chiefs and the Texans probably want to pay those guys as soon as possible, because whoever pays them second is probably going to have to jump the first in terms of the money on the contract, and they're going to have to spend more. And we've seen that throughout this whole pandemic. That's the one thing owners really do not want to do, is spend more money. But going back to Jamaal Adams, you don't hear guys like Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson complain about their contracts. And when you look at those guys and you compare them and what they've done in the National Football League compared to Jamaal Adams, it's not close. Pat Mahomes has won a Super Bowl MVP. He's won a Super Bowl. He's won an actual MVP. Deshaun Watson has thrown for a bunch of yards and has won a couple divisions and a playoff game. And when you compare what those guys have done since they've gotten to the league to Jamaal Adams, it's not even close. As good of a player as Jamaal Adams is, what amount of winning have the New York Jets done since he's been on the team? You guys know it's not a lot. But I'll also say this. As much as I've just ripped Jamaal Adams for the way he's acted and for the way he's handled this whole situation, and do I think he may want out of town based on the way he's acted? Absolutely. What I also will say is this. I don't want to trade this guy. The New York Jets over the last 10 years have not been very good at drafting players. And when you look at the selection of Jamaal Adams, he's been the one player that has really worked out. And maybe he wants to be traded, because you also saw, according to sources yesterday, that he listed, 6 or 7 teams that he would possibly be interested in going to. The 49ers, the Seahawks, the Chiefs, the Texans, the Ravens, I believe, were all on that list, with the Cowboys as well. And the thing that really turned me off about Jamaal Adams in this whole thing is that he said it's not about the contract. He said that if he got traded to one of those teams, he would be fine just sitting it out and not hold out and not complain like he's doing with the New York Jets right now. And when I saw that information, that's when it really hit me. Like, damn, this dude just doesn't want to be here. Because when he's saying if he went to one of those teams, he wouldn't even have to sign a contract, he's not saying it's about it. He's saying it's not about the contract right now. What I'm confused by, and what pisses me off, to be quite honest with you, is that Jamaal Adams is saying he would play for those kind of teams without a new contract under his belt. So if that's the case, and you love the New York Jets so much, why aren't you doing that with us? What is the deal here? To be honest, I would have a little more respect for Jamaal Adams if he would have just came out and said, I want to play for a winner. I don't want to play for the New York Jets. Trade me. I would have at least some respect for him. Would I agree with it? No. Is that the right way to do business? No, but at least he's being honest. In this situation, I just think he's trolling with the New York Jets. And I think over the course of their franchise's history, right? I've been a Jet fan for the last 13 years, right? Since I've started watching football. There have been plenty of things to bash the New York Jets about. Whether it's the butt fumble, whether it's passing on Dan Marino in the draft, whether it's firing their general manager right after he spent the most amount of money in an offseason that you have in a while. Like, there are plenty of reasons to roast the New York Jets. Whether it's hiring Adam Gase, I think we all know that wasn't a great hire. But at the same time, I'm not going to rip Joe Douglas for the way he's handled this. I think behind closed doors, Joe Douglas has had to tell Jamaal Adams, look, we want you to stay. We want you to be a Jet for life. But I think you got to realize, dude, we're in the middle of the pandemic. And oh yeah, you still have 2 years left on your contract. To be honest, it doesn't really make sense for the New York Jets to pay Jamaal Adams right now when you consider that he's a safety, and as good of a player as he is, it's not like the New York Jets are going to have won anything with him over the last couple years. And that's why the more and more I look at this situation, once again, I think he might want his way out, because he's acting like an idiot for no reason. I think he has to be smarter than that. And if he really does want out, it's going to be interesting to see what the New York Jets would do. Would I trade him? It really depends what the deal is, but ideally, I lean no, but once again, it really depends. Like, I saw a possible offer of the New York Jets getting Michael Gallup and a first-round pick from the Dallas Cowboys for Jamaal Adams. I'd do that trade. And it's interesting because I don't want to trade Jamaal Adams, especially for nothing. But the way he's been acting over the last couple of days and over the last couple of months, the more and more you kind of think as a Jet fan, all right, maybe is it the right thing to do to trade this guy? But with that being said, it has to be in the right deal. When I look at Jamaal Adams as a player and what he's done since he's gone to the New York Jets, right? He's been very good. But at the same time, I'll also say this. He has been one of the rare draft picks that has actually worked out for this New York Jet team. Whether it's Vernon Gholston, whether it's Mark Sanchez, whether it's Stephen Hill, whether it's D. Milliner. There have been so many guys that the New York Jets have drafted with high picks, Christian Hackenberg as well, over the last couple of years that really haven't worked out. And I think if the New York Jets do trade Jamaal Adams, it could leave a sour taste in the locker room. He's one of the leaders of the defense. I feel like the players like playing with him. But I got to be honest, the more and more I evaluate the situation, if he keeps acting like this, I don't know if the Jets could have a choice. And I went back earlier and said that I like how Joe Douglas has, treated the situation, kind of just by staying put. And I don't think that's, doing anything wrong by the guy. Jamaal Adams has to realize that the Jets still have the leverage in this situation. He's a safety, and even though he's very good, his contract doesn't expire for another 2 years. Why are you paying this guy when you don't have to yet? And I think Jamaal Adams has to realize that, and the fact that we're in the middle of the pandemic, and the fact that he's a safety, and you don't see teams pay safeties as good as they are when they still have 3 years left on their rookie contract. Now, I'll also understand the person that says, look, Jamaal Adams, even though he's a safety, it's not his fault. He's one of the best safeties in football, and I want him on the team long term. And if Joe Douglas wants to pay him that, maybe next year or whenever, that's fine. But when you're in the middle of a pandemic and the New York Jets don't have to pay you yet, I don't think there's a real reason for Jamaal Adams to be going on Instagram and complaining about, how he's been being treated by the franchise and him demanding a trade. Because once again, I just don't think this is the right time, and he can't be dumb or naive enough not to realize that. As good as this player is, now is just not the right time. And going back to Joe Douglas, I'll give him props for the way he's handled this, but I'm not Joe Douglas' biggest supporter yet, and I'll explain to you what I mean. I feel like a lot of New York Jet fans, right, will praise Joe Douglas just because he hasn't really screwed up yet. And I agree, Joe Douglas hasn't made any real moves as the New York Jets general manager yet to make me scratch my head and say, what are you doing? But at the same time, I do feel like a lot of New York Jet fans are very quickly to praise the guy just because he hasn't screwed up when you compare him to the last couple general managers of this team. And I'll explain to you guys what I mean. It was clear very quickly that John Idzik wasn't the right guy for the job. Mike Tannenbaum and everything, how it ended there, it wasn't great. And obviously, when you look at the Mike Maccagnan era, that's going to be one that, for the most part, New York Jet fans are going to want to forget. But at the same time, Joe Douglas has only been the New York Jets general manager for one full season. He's had one free agent class that he's signed. He's had one draft class that he's picked. And even though a bunch of the moves like Denzel Mims and some of the other draft picks and some of the other off-season moves they made by improving the offensive line and getting some guys across defense, as good as those moves look like on paper, I'm not ready to praise Joe Douglas yet and call him, one of the better GMs in the franchise's history or call him established. But at the same time, I'm not going to blame him for the way he's handled this contract situation. Jamaal Adams looks like a clown, and the only reason I think he could be doing this is if he really, really wants out. And I guess if he really, really wants out and he starts dogging it, do you trade him? Maybe. But at the same time, once again, the New York Jets have to realize, and I think Joe Douglas has done this, that they have the leverage in this situation. What is Jamaal Adams going to do? Sit out for the next 2 years? Then what kind of contract are you going to get? And I think he has to realize that when you're a safety and when we're in the middle of a pandemic, now is just not the time for you to be complaining about the amount of money you're making unless he's intentionally trying to force himself out. And the more closely I look at it, that may be the case. And this is going to be a very interesting situation to monitor over the next couple weeks. But at the same time, maybe Jamaal Adams has played his last game in a New York Jet uniform. But if that's the case, that's entirely on him, not on the GM. It's just not the right time to pay him. And if the Dallas Cowboys want to give me a boatload of picks and a good player like Michael Gallup back, I'd probably trade him, because the more and more you look at Jamaal Adams and the way he's acting, maybe it's just going to get to a point where the New York Jets say, look, we want you here for the long term, but you've gave us no choice. We don't want you here anymore. We can't deal with the way you've been acting off the field, because let's face it, this guy's been acting like a baby, man. He really has, and it has to stop immediately. And if you want to build a culture, if you want to, get closer to a championship, you can't have a guy leading your defense that doesn't want to be here. And the more and more I look at the situation, that may be the case. But ideally, would I like for Joe Douglas to pay him and for Jamaal Adams to be on the team long term? Yes, but everyone has to realize that now, in the middle of a pandemic, just isn't the right time.